So I thought I would do a fairly simple walkthrough on this composite, which is titled Choices. So this is the final image. So I'm just going to jump all the way back to the start and start with the basic image that I took of my model. I had other images that I took that I could use to expand my image, and they had basic curves layers on them. I did a grey layer, which was just a colour fill, just to give me something to work on. So I wanted to add in some smoke and some texture and some colour to my image. I then took my base image and I took out the trees on either side to most of the extent. They're sort of still there, you can just see, but I was just working my way through. So I then added in a door. I then added in a shadow for that door. I then did a hue saturation adjustment. I removed the doorknob that was there because I decided that I wanted to put my own in. I did a shadow around the door to make it just step back a little bit from the edge of the tree. And this is where I put in the element of the doorknob. So what I did, I put that in first, then I put a shadow behind that, and then a deeper shadow in behind the actual key lock. I added in these mushrooms, so I actually added them in like one at a time. A lot of them, they're just duplicate elements. So there's 3 different mushrooms that I added in separately, and they've all got a little bit of shadow and things like that to them as well. So building up from there. So then I added in the keys, and again the keys are all on a separate layer. I just grouped them together so to make it easier to work with, and even each group, so there's a color saturation to it, a hue saturation to it. I was extending it, adding to it, doing color balances and effects like shadows and things like that. So it can be quite time consuming to put it all together, but it is very enjoyable to do that. So now I had it all pretty much as I wanted it, but it's still a long way from what I would call a finished piece. So this is where you can then come into color toning, adding textures, working with light, and things like that. So I used an action called Into the Woods. Then I added in some light. Now this is just set to normal, and I've just painted in. So if I just did, can't even see it on its own, it's literally just light that I have painted in with a brush. So if I was to go on a new layer, I could come in with my brush and I could paint in light as you wish. I would then probably blur that, and then you could set it to screen, whoops, and bring the lighting back. So there's different ways you can do it. This looks like it's actually maybe an overlay that I have painted, and I created a whole heap of my own. So I've got texture overlays that I use that you can see down here. I've also got lighting overlays and things like that that I use. I then added a color adjustment. This is one that I use all the time. And what I actually do is I put in a solid fill color. So just come in here, pick solid color, and then I will either set it to screen or I will set it to exclusion, depending on which way I want to go, and drop the opacity right back. So that's a beautiful way to tie it all in, and between that and the color adjustment, or the action that you can see, it's already taken it and jumped it up into a whole new level. Then I added some lookup tables. Again, some of these are fairly constant that I use. Oops. So this one's tension green. If I click on this one is edgy amber, and this one is Fuji Reeler 500. So just playing around with those, and I changed the opacity on them. I changed the blend mode. So this one's at soft light at 9%. This one's at soft light at 13%. So I changed the opacity, I changed the blend modes, and play around with them. It really can make a huge difference. I did another colour fill. This one's just white, but at 10%, because I found it was just getting just a little bit dark and gloomy. I wanted to brighten it up just a touch. I then went into Nick Color Effects and Analog Effects, I think this was, and playing around with various different looks and things that you can get in there. But again, I have dropped the opacity down, and I, even with a layer mask, I masked a little bit of it out so it wasn't quite so strong. Without the mask, and if I put it to 100%, it was just a little soft. So I just wanted to mask it out a little bit. I also did another light layer. Again, this one is to soft light at normal at 50%, and that's where I've just painted it in and blurred it like I did before. I just felt it needed a little more. Something else that I really like to do is adding a curves layer, but setting it to multiply. Sometimes you're lightening, sometimes you're darkening. I really like doing a multiply. If I did it at 100%, it's too dark. But keeping it at 40%, that just adds a little bit of depth and contrast back into my image. I could have done a contrast layer, but I just like doing a curves layer, setting it to multiply. You don't even have to do anything to it. Just drop the opacity and it works a treat. So let me just get rid of that one. Okie dokie. I then merged it all onto another layer. I just wanted to see how I was going and what I was working with. I then come in and I did a bit of a vignette. So I made it a little bit darker in the middle, darker on the edges, I should say, and not in the middle. So that was just using a curve layer. If you've not done something like that before, get a new layer, which is what this one is here, and I could go to an eclipse tool, mark that off, right click, feather it to say 200 pixels. Then I would inverse that, and then I can come in with adding a layer mask and drop the edges off like so. So I then just went in with the brush and just randomized it a little bit, basically, because I didn't want it too perfect. I then added a texture to my image. Now, if I change this to normal and 100%, so that's a texture I added in. Now, I took it off some of my model with a layer mask, and then I set it to soft light. So let's just go back. What was it? At 32%. There we go. I then did another color enhancement, which was a action. I use actions a lot. I don't know if you've ever used actions, but I have a lot of them by Fine Art Actions. and the colour collections and various, and of course I make my own as well. So I've got my own actions. So there's a cinematic one that I use with a dodge, a burn and a high pass that I use that all the time, and then I have my portrait ones as well. So that was just another one I did. I did yet another curves layer. This time I was playing around with the red, blue and the green channels. So I put a little bit more blue into my image. I didn't do anything with the greens on this particular one because it was already quite green, and I didn't do much with the red. So it was just predominantly shifting the colours in the shadows just a little more towards the blue. And that pretty much is the final image. So going back to where we started eventually, this was the image that I always had in my mind, was with my Rapunzel, basically. This is from a series called Rapunzel, and she was sitting into a tree and looking at it and thinking, you know, what choice did she have to make? Which key would get her through the door and into the next part of her journey? And that's why this image was called Choices. So from the outset, this was the image that I had in my mind. So it's always good to have a little bit of a sketch or a drawing or an idea of where you want to go.